Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and it is my privilege and honor that in our third year of broadcast, as we launch our third anniversary, or the beginning of our third year of broadcast, that we continue with our relationship with Carl Gallups, who's with us on the second Monday of every month at 12 o'clock. We've covered his books, author of Gods of Ground Zero and Gods and Thrones, Nahash, Forgotten Prophecy, and the Return of the Elohim. We've covered When the Lion Roars, Understand the Implications of Ancient Prophecy for Our Time, and we've talked about his great lengthy history as the senior pastor of Hickory Hammock Baptist Church. But more importantly, he is the founder of the Internet PNN News and Ministry Network, ppsimmons.com, and a beloved brother and friend and author of a book which is coming out in February called The Rabbi, the Secret Message and the Identity of Messiah. It is more than an honor and a privilege and a blessing to introduce you to someone who has become a mentor, a trusted advisor, a friend, someone that I communicate with both on the air and off the air, and consider him to be a part of my family. One of my safe people in my life is Carl Gallups. Carl, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Back at you, Rabbi Eric. Everything you said, back to you. Thank you. It's an honor to be your friend and brother and fellow ambassador of the kingdom of Jesus Christ, and it's always a thrill for me to be on your show. So thanks for having me.
Well, we're delighted. We get a lot of coverage. A lot of people watch it. A lot of people wait to hear what you and I have to talk about. And one of the things that, aside from the new book coming out, and I want to get to that because that is very, very exciting, and maybe we'll cover that exclusively in the second half hour, but there are some things happening around the world that people aren't aware of. You just shared with me a report out of China, and I find it to be fascinating what's going on in other countries that have biblical import, because China, which is the nation of Sin in the Bible, they are mentioned in the Bible. Most people don't see it as China, but S-I-N, the nation of Sin, is mentioned in the Bible, and that is China. So it does have biblical implications when we talk about this 200 million man army, when we talk about this dry riverbed, and have a clear path to be able to mobilize troops all the way from this path down the Euphrates, to be able to mobilize from China all the way to into Israel, on a dry riverbed that's wide enough to support the traffic of heavy artillery and equipment and armed personnel carriers and troops, if it is in fact somewhere of a nation of that sort, as we begin to look at where this army is going to come from and why the significance of the dry riverbed and why it being a highway, along that highway that was the path where the merchants of the East brought and came all the way down as they came down from China all the way into Egypt. So they do play a lot of reference points in the Bible, although there's only a couple of very specific references. There's certainly a player. What's been going on, and what's the latest that you're reading coming out of China?
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, yes, kudos to everything you just said. You and I stand on the same page with that. As a matter of fact, in the new book, which we'll talk about later, I've got several chapters dealing with China, their place in prophecy, and how it ties in to the whole story of the rabbi who found Messiah. That's another segment, but I'm just, as you're talking, all of this is flooding back to my mind. But also, what I wanted to speak with your audience about, perhaps many of them saw this because it was all over the internet, and it came first out of the New York Times, so a major mainstream media source, not some back channel conspiracy site. It was picked up everywhere, and there was a headline just a few days ago. In fact, I shared this from my pulpit yesterday morning. In fact, these two articles I'm going to reference, I shared right from my pulpit Sunday morning and went right to the biblical nature of the whole thing. But here's the deal. New York Times headline, I don't have it right in front of me, so I'm going to paraphrase, but your audience can look it up on the search engines and they'll find it. It says, China says We need more men to mentor our boys. Our boys are becoming more effeminate. And as you read the article, you discover that the Chinese leadership, most of them being atheist, as you and I know, and persecutors of the church, by the way, they are literally, when you read this article, they're panicking. They're freaking out. They're calling for more men teachers in their school system, more men mentors, more men that can act as role models, because they're noticing this sweeping, nationally globalistic phenomena of the feminizing of their men, and they're deeply concerned about it. All right, now take that and set it aside for a moment. That was New York Times just a couple of days ago. A couple of days prior to that, the article I picked up on was Fox News, but I tracked down its resources, and it was from the American Psychiatric Association, and it was picked up in most of the mainstream, well, all of the mainstream media and Christian news networks, etc. I saw the article on Fox News. Just a few days before China releases their appeal to their nation, one of the largest populated nation on the planet. By the way, the second largest Christian population of a singular nation on the planet. More people in the United States profess to be Christians than any other nation of the world. Now, I'm not saying all people in the United States that profess it are born-again, Jesus-loving Christians, but about 70% of our population says that they are born-again believers. China is slated to surpass that in the year 2030 or before. So you're dealing with the two largest Christian nations on the planet. You see the spiritual implications here. One of them is crying out, our men are becoming more effeminate. Our men are becoming demasculinized. We've got to have some help. We've got to have men to stand up and be real men and to introduce manliness back to our boys. Our boys are becoming feminized. 2 days prior to that, the American Psychiatric Association lamblasts traditional masculinity. And what they mean is American masculinity. That's what they mean, but they're not saying it. They don't bemoan hyper-masculinity. They don't bemoan perverted masculinity, where somebody just goes around all pumped up and hating and beating everybody up. And they don't do that. They call it traditional masculinity. Well, what does that mean? I mean, we could do a whole show on the definition of traditional masculinity, but the American Psychiatric Association puts out a report, the result of a study. The mainstream media picks it up and lauds it, and they talk about this famous medical association, this highly esteemed medical association. And the American Psychiatric Association is saying that being a male in America, in the American culture, is, quote, this is their word, dangerous. And then they go on to say it develops homophobia, it develops violence, and they just go down misogynistic behavior. They go down this list of these horrible things that you and I know, brother, are the result of human sin nature, not masculinity. Listen, there are women that are homophobes. There are women that are violent. There are women that hate other women. There are women that hate men. This is not a man thing. It's not a woman thing. It is a human thing. And if you are not saved, if you are not under the regenerative power of the Holy Spirit of God, any one of us, 7 billion people on the planet, we are all susceptible to the deepest, darkest sins of greed and perversion and anger and maltreatment of other human beings that you can imagine. And we've seen example after example of it down through history. So this whole American Psychological Association report, it's gobbledygook. I actually read through it from the pulpit. I broke it down. I simply went through one time and substituted the word femininity for masculinity and female and girl for male and boy. And I just put the female terms in their report and read it, and it comes out exactly the same. In other words, they don't even realize they have described the human condition, not the male condition. The human fallen condition in a society like ours that's turning away from God, turning away from God's word, turning away from the Ten Commandments, turning away from everything foundationally godly in our structure, in our culture. And now we're wondering why there's so much hate and anger and separation between us as Americans. Listen, I'm not going to put all of the evils at the last presidential administration's feet, but I can say 8 years of the last administration was kind of the exclamation point on the end of the sentence in dividing our nation. You know, the police acted stupidly. That boy could be my son. Black Lives Matter, on. And then the mantra that came out of all that hatred, the vitriol, the apology tour, America's evil, America's horrible. I mean, that is what divided the nation. That had a huge part in stirring up anger and emotion in people's lives. Then when the edict was issued by that administration to the public school system in the United States of America, affecting tens and tens and tens and tens of millions of people and children, that little boys and little girls should be able to shower together and dress together and change together. I mean, that created division and anger and angst and, yes, even hatred. And so if you want to talk about something that we can measure, that we saw happen before our eyes, that caused division and misogyny and homophobia and anger and hatred of other people, that was it. But just the fact that you and I are males, and I would say that you and I are traditional males, and I don't know how they would define that, but by traditional, I'm thinking I'm attracted to women and not men. Not being ugly, I'm just saying that's traditional manhood. I want to be monogamous with my wife, and I have been, by the way, and will be, lest I be killed by her. But I want to be a man of God. I want to have some righteousness in my life. I want to have some sincerity, some integrity in my life. I have a protector mechanism in me. I don't care who it is. If I'm out in public in a mall and I see somebody being abused, that kicks in on me. I mean, I used to be a cop for 11 years. Maybe it's some of that too. But I also think it's something about traditional masculinity, things that God builds in the lives of most men. Not all men are equal. We don't come out cookie cutter. I get that. Some men lean a little more towards the emotional side. Some are so super stoic that you can hardly even get them to speak. And some are more in the middle, like I think probably you and I are. So the bottom line is, this whole perverted mess of trying to either to feminize men, to make them more effeminate, to get in touch with their feelings and emotions. And the American Psychiatric Association said that that was the remedy, to get men to be more in touch with feelings and emotions. Well, I get that, but only if it is under the direction of the Holy Spirit. Otherwise, if I operate totally by feelings, instead of God's word and a foundation, I can go off into the deepest perversions that you've ever thought of. So the bottom line, and I want to get this across to your audience, and they know this, you've got a brilliant audience, and I know I'm preaching to the choir talking to you about it, but look what's happening, brother. This perversion, this depravity of mind that the Bible spoke of that would come in the last days, it is now global. From China, the largest the heaviest populated nation on the earth, with the second largest concentration of Christians living in it, the United States of America, the largest concentration of Christians in any singular nation, the most prolific hyperpower that the world has ever seen. There's never been a nation, and I'm even going to use the word empire, although we're not an empire, but you think of the Persian Empire, the Roman Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the Greek Empire. They couldn't hold a candle to the power and the might that the United States has, and it's the largest Christian nation that supports Israel, supports Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. I mean, so you think of this, China, which is in the Bible by name, and actually, as you said, seen, it translates to China of today, but in those ancient biblical days, it was a collection of Asiatic nation states that would later become what we would call China. But you've got these two hugely populated, Christian populated nations, and the attack is aimed at the identity of men first, and the identity of women, because at the same time that men are becoming feminized, there is a demonic attack on womanhood to become more masculine and less feminine, and to usurp whatever responsibilities and accountabilities God gave men. There's that demonic presence that's sweeping the globe now, and this demonic attack on childhood and the gender of little boys and the gender of little girls. And we need to teach them that they can switch genders and that it depends upon what? How they feel, you see. So you've got all of these forces now working for the first time in the history of humanity that are going global because of the instantaneous information communication networks that are now available: cell phones, internet, satellite technology, cable television, satellite television, all of these communication techniques. Now the perversion of mankind, every thought and intention of man is becoming evil all over the globe, and all flesh is becoming corrupt. Gee, does that sound anything familiar to the scriptures? Jesus said it would be this way. So right popping out of the headlines, Rabbi Eric, of this week, China, our boys are more like women than like men. Nationwide, we have a crisis. This is what the Chinese leader said, not me. And then just a few days prior, in America, the American Psychiatric Association, lauded as a prestigious medical group by the mainstream media, they're warning Americans we need to feminize our boys a lot more. They're just too masculine. They're too male. There's too much testosterone running through our nation. And this is dangerous because it can lead to violence and homophobia and all these things. Brother, this is demonic. It's an attack on the seed of the womb of the woman. Of course, the ultimate seed being Jesus Christ. But since the church is born, now we're the seed, if you will. And the satanic attack upon the womb, abortion holocaust globally. Gender dysphoria becoming global, the feminization of men, now China, the United States becoming global. In the meantime, borders are collapsing. Terrorism is running rampant. I mean, if people cannot see the prophetic implications of this, oh my goodness. Well, I know your audience does because you keep them posted on this. But anyway, thanks for letting me unpack this. I know it took a long time, but you can tell I'm pretty passionate about it. This is demonic. I see it for what it is. I don't just read a headline and say, oh, well, they're having trouble with boys in China. Oh, the American Psychiatric Association's gone crazy again. No, I see it for what it is. This is an all-out demonic assault in these last days before the return of Jesus Christ.
You know, it's so interesting that in America we have the fatherless syndrome of inner city America, and we're putting out thugs and gang members. And two guests I had on last week, Jason Wilson, that wrote about men being able to cry, and he works with inner city youth and gets them past the tough guy thug to really get in touch with the emotion that real men do cry, based on the passage of scripture that says Jesus wept. And so this, if we're supposed to follow in this model, not that we're supposed to be weak, but we are supposed to be in touch with our full body, mind, and soul, spirit, and have everything lined up. If Jesus wept, then it's certainly good enough for us. The other one was Casey Diaz, who was an incarcerated El Salvadorian thug, gang member, rose at 11 years old to be called the famous Casey, was incarcerated, took a plea deal on a murder, figuring if he took a plea deal on one murder, they wouldn't look at all the rest to prosecute him for, and took 12 years, 8 months in a penitentiary in California, was moved into solitary confinement, and was going to be spending 8 years in solitary confinement. In year 5, Jesus appeared to him on this cell block wall, as if it was the old, what was it, 8mm reel, whatever it was, and he could hear the clicking of the film, and it was Jesus speaking to him and carrying his cross and setting his cross up and climbing up on the cross and holding out his arms and having the nails supernaturally appeared and saying that I'm going to take my last breath for you, Casey Diaz, Darwin. He called him Darwin, which was his first name. and I'm going to die for your sins. And he actually heard the breath leave the body of Jesus. And he heard the Lord tell him, go ask for a chaplain. And he didn't know what a chaplain was. It was not a word that he was familiar with or a concept. And he went to rap on the door of his solitary confinement cell, and the door swung open. And I said to him, you realize you had an experience that Peter had.
Yes,
And
I thought the same thing.
He said, I've been telling this story for 15 years. They're the first person to ever say that I had an experience that Peter had. Now you've given me just complete. I was humbled by the story to begin with. Now I am so incredibly humbled that you would compare me to a Peter whose door flew open, of course, and we know the rest of the story. But here was a man that was exhibiting this manly behavior, of course, of thuggery. Then you have these Chinese that are not exhibiting manly behavior at all. And then you have this problem we have in America with the fatherless. And you see how Satan is working on all aspects, on every part of a man. Yes. Because if he can break the man down, he can subjugate the man. And this is the message of Islam. This is going to be the message of the Antichrist. He's going to come along and make a covenant with many that he's going to take care of all your needs. That's what a lot of men are looking to hear. Somebody's going to they want to be a mama's boy. Well, then they can be a mama's boy. Somebody's going to take care of all their needs. They're going to have all this given to them, and it plays very handily. And unless we look at it through a biblical lens, we're going to miss out on the subtlety of all these things that are happening around us and not make the connection that these are the wiles of the enemy, and they're playing out in unusual ways in diverse places.
Yes, yes, yes. You know, you're absolutely right. And, you know, listen, I don't know, I'm not looking at the clock here. I really have an illustration that I think would be invaluable for your audience. It would take me 5 or 6 minutes to unpack it, though.
Okay, well, then let's go to break. Right now, we're at the 25 of the hour, perfect time for our break. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to return with Carl Gallups, who is a featured guest here on Revealing the Truth. You can visit his bio, his profile, and a link to all his books at ignitingnation.com. Click on Featured Guests, and these are handpicked by me. We have 17 now of like-minded, Dr. Michael Lake, Dr. Michael Heiser, Derek Gilbert, Carl Gallups. We have Dr. Mark Baker, who deals with shame. We have just an incredible roster of featured guests. Joel Richardson is joining us as a featured guest on this program to talk about Mount Sinai, to talk about the Islamic Antichrist, to talk about the fabulous breakthrough work he's doing. We're in partnership with the Skywatch TV team and their authors through Defender Publishing, and all of us are coming together. Rabbi Zev Porat is a part of that. It is an honored group of just incredible. Michael Heiser, a part of this esteemed assembly of featured guests here as we begin our third year of broadcast here on the Igniting a Nation Broadcasting Network. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to hear this revelatory illustration from Carl Gallups. We'll be right back. Not everything that makes the headlines has biblical importance, but many events that happen around the world do, and you never hear about them. Igniting a Nation is pleased to teach Revealing Prophecy every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. at the Marriott 280 in Birmingham. We will cover worldwide events and insider information that will connect the dots of what's happening around the world with biblical prophecy. If you happen to miss a class, we'll televise each week's class at 10 o'clock Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our social media outlets. Copies of the teachings will also be available to purchase on our website at www.ignitinganation.com. The Lord meets you right where you are, and so does Igniting a Nation's new live streaming outlets. You can now watch Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Prophecy Revealed
simulcast live each Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Vimeo, Periscope, and through our website, www.ignitinganation.com. No matter what device you are using, our program will automatically scale so you won't have to miss a single program. And if you happen to miss an episode, you can always subscribe to the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel and access over 1,000 interviews and never miss your favorite authors, special guests, and topics that interest you the most.
There are lots of ways to see Israel, but nothing compares to seeing the land of the book and the people of the book through the eyes of two Jewish believers who can take you on a journey that will bring the entire Bible to life. When you join Rabbi Eric Walker and his #1 rated tour guide, Edo Canaan, in Israel, you'll experience incredible teachings, first-class accommodations, and actually walk where Jesus walked. You will experience the Bible transforming from black and white into living color, and you will never see the Bible in the same way again. For more information, visit us at www.ignitinganation.com/events.
The Lord contends with what contends with you, and Igniting a Nation is committed to bringing to light each and every issue that faces a believer's life. Our live stream programming and teachings take you on a journey to finding biblical truth from a wide variety of experts who share their insights into a deeper walk with the Lord. We have assembled the most comprehensive panel of experts in the fields of prophecy, caregiving, healing from trauma, shame, and abuse, and so much more. We continue to expand our teachings and programming to meet your needs. We're committed to healing the nations with biblical truth. Visit www.ignitinganation.com to develop a deeper walk with the Lord and start your journey to a transformed life. The Bible commands us to study to show ourselves approved, but most study using Bible study tools and not actually studying the Bible chapter and verse. Igniting a Nation is pleased to present Revealing the Bible, recorded and taught each week before a live audience. We take you deeper into the actual Bible and verse in both Hebrew and English and connect the dots between the Old and New Testament. You can attend our 2 classes in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, or watch the program every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our other simulcast outlets. For more information, visit www.ignitinganation.com/events.
Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and as we do on the second Monday of every month at the 12 o'clock p.m. Central Time hour, we meet for the Carl Gallups Hour, hosted by our good friend out of Hickory Hammock Baptist Church, out of the ppsimmons.com PNN News and Ministry Network, the author of best-selling books, Gods of Ground Zero, Gods and Thrones, Nahash, Forgotten Prophecy, The Return of the Elohim, When the Lion Roars, and the newly released book coming out in February, The Rabbi, The Secret Message, and the Identity of Messiah. Our dear good friend from Hickory Hammock Baptist Church in Milton, Florida, Carl Gallups. Such a delight to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to be with you. Did you want me to pick up where we left off, brother?
I do.
Okay. So we were talking about this report out of China, report out of American Medical Association, American Psychiatric Association. This alarm in China that their boys are becoming more and more effeminate. They want more men involved. They want more manliness in their culture. The opposite is happening in America. The American Psychiatric Association is coming out saying, no, traditional masculinity is terrible. It's toxic. It does damage. It leads to violence and homophobia, misogyny, et cetera, et cetera. And so we were talking about the spiritual implications of that. And then we went to break. Right before we did, I said I had an illustration that I think will help men and women, boys and girls, but men and women especially, because, you know, our culture in America, let's just speak of America's culture, and I know your show goes to the world, but there's just such a perversion of manhood, womanhood, marriage, home, family, relationships between men and women, relationships between husbands and wives. There's this politically correct mantra that women can do anything a man can do, and women are just as good or more important or as important, and it perverts the whole conversation, because before you can even begin to break that down, you have to give qualifiers and disclaimers, and you have to apologize for speaking the truth. And so I've got an illustration that just, to me, straightens all of this out. Every time I use it, people are blown away by it. I've written about it. I speak on it. I do interviews. Here's the illustration. So let's make it as simple as this. I'm in my home, or you make it personal to you. You, audience members, people that are watching and listening. You're in your home, and you are there. Let's speak from the point of view of the man for a moment. You're in the home, and 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, you wake up. The smoke alarms are going off. You wake up, to your horror, you see orange glow coming down the hall. You realize that the back end of your house is on fire. I mean, there's not just a little plug that's sparked. I mean, the house is on fire. You're desperately trying to, you can be a man or a woman here. You're desperately trying to get your loved ones together and into safety. In the meantime, you or somebody's calling 911. You're trying to salvage some valuables, but at the same time, make sure nobody's lives are in danger. All this stuff's going through your mind. Your house is on fire. It's burning down. But you've called 911. Before long, you hear sirens. Oh, you're just so relieved that maybe some help is on the way. You hear sirens. They're blaring in the night. The next thing you see are 2 patrol cars, 2 police officers, or deputy sheriffs, or police, wherever you are, and they pull up in your driveway. Well, you're relieved, you're excited. You know the 911 call went through. You know that emergency personnel are hearing the call. They've arrived at your home. But your heart sinks a little bit, because you realize these guys don't have fire hoses. They don't have fire extinguishers. They don't have oxygen tanks and helmets and axes and firefighting equipment. They're here basically to control traffic, to control the perimeter, maybe to assist in getting you to safety, which you appreciate. You love and appreciate the law enforcement officers, but what you want to see right now are red lights coming down, not blue lights. You want to see great big fire trucks filled with water, and you want to see men and maybe some women get off dressed in the proper equipment, and the fire hoses broken out, and water being doused, and people going into your home trying to contain the blaze. That's what you want. All right, now watch. Now another scenario, 3 o'clock in the morning. You notice 3 o'clock in the morning, that's the most terrible time. That's when Satan does all of his nasty stuff. People wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning with nightmares, etc. All right, so now 3 o'clock in the morning, you hear a pounding that wakes you up. Just pound, 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 pound. You wake up to realize somebody's trying to kick down the front door of your house. And so your family is in panic. You grab a pistol from your nightstand. You run towards the living room, perhaps, and you realize this is a sure enough attempted break-in. Your spouse is on the phone calling 911. You look out the window and you see it's a drug-crazed lunatic with a machete in his hand, and in one hand, and he's just pounding and framming. He's getting ready to kick the door down. So in the meantime, you're prepared to defend your family, but you're hoping you don't have to kill anybody. You're hoping you don't have to shoot somebody in front of your family and all that goes with it. So you're hoping and praying, hurry up, cops, hurry up, cops, hurry up, cops. The next thing you see is an emergency response unit from the fire department. And a fire truck pulls up, and a couple of firemen get out. And well, you're thankful for that. Now you have an extra hand or two. You got maybe a couple of burly firemen there to help you. But what you really want to see are the blue lights coming. Now you want the cops there, who have the equipment and the training and the shotguns and the pistols and the badges and the patrol cars with cages in them to deal with this drug-crazed lunatic. And you look out the window and you see there's 2 or 3 others of his buddies out there. This was getting ready to be a mob home invasion. And so now you've got those scenarios. Here's the illustration. So I ask, and you don't have to answer this out loud. This is, I'm just asking for the illustration. So who's more important, the cops or the firemen? Who's less important? Who's the most important to our society? Well, the answer is they're both equally important. They're both very important to our society. But the deal is, the disclaimer is, but it depends upon the scenario, how really needed they are, how really important they are to that situation, because of how they are equipped, how they are trained, the environment they have around them, the support system, etc. So when your house is burning down, you want firemen. When thugs are trying to break in and kill your family, you want police officers. You're happy to have either one of them show up, but you want those people. Why? Because a fireman is always better than a policeman? No, that's not true. Is a policeman always better than a fireman? No, that's not true. What's the difference? The difference is they are both equally important to our culture, but they are equipped differently. It's the same thing with male and female, brother. The Bible is clear. Male and female, man and woman, they are equally important to God. They're equally important to the kingdom work. They're equally not. Are we still there? Yeah. Oh, okay. I had an alert show up on my screen that I thought maybe we had lost contact. But they are equipped differently. They are trained differently. They handle things in a different manner. So it is like men and women. It's like a marriage. Look, my wife is equally important to our marriage as I am. My wife brings an equal amount, if you will, of all kinds of her gifts to the marriage that I do. The deal is that she is not, just like a police officer and a firefighter. When a police officer shows up at your house burning down, and they don't grab a hose and try to help you put it out from your garden hose, you can't sue them for that. That's not their responsibility. That's not their accountability. The same thing if a fireman shows up when you got a bunch of drug-crazed fools outside in your yard trying to break in. You can't hold them accountable because they didn't go wrestle them down and fight the guns and knives themselves. They're not equipped to do that. It's the same thing with men and women. We are held accountable for what God has called us to do, for the roles He has put us in. And we are equally important. We are equally valuable to the world, to the kingdom, to marriages, homes, and families, but we are equipped differently. God expects different accountability out of us. He has assigned different roles to us. He has made us differently so that when we go together, like cops and firemen, you put those two together, we've got an awesome city with some real servants. And you can add to that the ambulance people, the doctors, the surgeons, the nurses, all of these people, different roles, equally important in different situations. It's the same with male and female. And the quicker we can get that through our mind, this is how God created it, Brother Eric, as you know, that if you want to be blessed by God, then do what Paul said, seek the most excellent way. And I say to women, you seek to be an excellent woman of God. Celebrate your femininity. Celebrate your womanhood. Celebrate how God has made you so that you fit together with not only your husband, the man, but with men in general. And the same thing with men. Celebrate your manhood. Celebrate what you're supposed to be. Celebrate your role. Celebrate your responsibilities, and do your best to lift up and exalt the women in your life. If it's your wife, in a very special, special way to exalt her, but all of the women in your life, understanding that the men and women complete each other. Please forgive me for being trite and quoting a movie line, but we complete each other. That's what the Word of God says. God says this is very good, that the men and the women be slightly different in their psyche, very different in their physical abilities, but yet both human, both in the image of God, both important to the kingdom, equally important as human beings to the world, but with different roles and different accountabilities. The quicker we can get that in our heads and teach that to our children, teach the boys to become men, teach the girls to become women, and teach them how they go together, the more we can get the kingdom work done. But you see what Satan's doing. He's perverting all of this. He's perverting manhood. He's perverting womanhood. He's perverting marriage, home, family. He's perverting gender. He's perverting the little girls. He's perverting the little boys. He's perverting it all through abortion, through psychological manipulation. It's a part of the last days delusion. Does that illustration help, brother?
Completely and totally. It paints a complete portrait as to what's going on, why the body is eroding, mentors, both male and female, grandparents who are taking a more active role. We've lost our way as to family values, and with the absentee father in the inner city, we've created a whole nother program from identity, and this paves the way for the advancement of Islam, which says that, hey, you don't need to join this gang or this gang, you can become a part of a family. And we're seeing that happen in the prison system as more prisoners are joining together with this family. They're getting rights, they're getting privileges, they're getting somebody that they could join the larger body. And that's the Islam where it's growing behind the scenes that doesn't make the media. It's not jihad, it's not the blowing up of a building, it's not a hostage situation, but yet it's permeating our inner city and our places of incarceration, and is growing. This is the message of Louis Farrakhan. And everybody says, well, why wouldn't you hate him? Why wouldn't you despise him? Why wouldn't you label him an anti-Semite? Why would he even be allowed to have a place in this nation? And it's because he has so many followers that happen to be incarcerated. There's over 2 million men incarcerated in America, and that's quite an army once they get out and they've joined together to raise the numbers in America of who they consider to be members of the Nation of Islam. So there's just a number of factors and a number of issues going on at play. We've got about 10 minutes left. I want to kind of get you to tease the new book, The Rabbi, The Secret Message, and the Identity of Messiah. It's a very exciting work. It's already brought threats to Zev Porat in Israel by Yad Lechem, which is an anti-missionary group that is already nervous about the release of this expose and the insights that it brings into the Jewish community that will be a part of talking to the remnant of Israel that has had this partial blinding. And it uses a narrative of a rabbi as opposed to trying to convince a Christian through a teaching on Romans 11 as to how to create the great omission to a population that they have provoked for the last 1,800 years, and not to jealousy. So it becomes a tool that bypasses the whole mess, if you will, of what Christianity has done to Jews over the course of the last 18 centuries. And it kind of uses a standalone tool, the same way I came to faith, was in terms I understood, in a language I understood, in a scenario I understood, and an identity that I can understand without stop being Jewish. And
That's
so
right.
you lose me at, well, when did you convert?
Right.
I didn't convert to anything. And
Right.
why would I? When did you convert to believe in the Jewish Messiah would be the more practical, but oh, thank goodness for the logic and reason of the Jerusalem Council, who said, you don't have to become Jewish, and these guys don't have to stop being Jewish. You've only read part of that Acts chapter 15 narrative.
Thank you.
That is to the engrafted, but to those of us, look, if you read Romans, I believe it's Romans 12:22, it says, God will continue in his kindness to the Gentiles, provided they continue in their kindness to the Jews. Then he goes on later in Romans, I believe around Romans 20, it says, listen, if you do things by nature that are in accordance with the law as a Gentile, God credits you that as righteousness. But if a Jewish believer does things in accordance with the law, big surprise. That's what they were trained to do. That's what they were. And so when Paul writes and says, you know, all these things that you were trained to do, all these things that you learned how to do, I'm not telling you to throw all that away. I'm telling you to play it out without causing another to have to adopt that, because God's got his own plan of how he's going to honor the righteousness of the Gentiles. So here we have this rabbi, the secret message, in the identity of Messiah, and something that you and Rabbi Zev Porat have collaborated on.
Yes, we did collaborate on it. We've done the bulk. I've done the bulk of the writing. He contributed chapter after chapter after chapter of material. I called upon you, my dear friend, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, my brother in the Lord, if you would help me with it. You've provided several chapters worth of information, insight, quotes from you, a testimony from you. Insight. I'm working on another book that's coming out this fall. You've provided me with material and insight for that. You're such a dear friend. So here I am, a Gentile, dealing with two Jews who are believers in Jesus Christ, who have become some of my best friends in the world. And the last two books we've produced, we're all in this together, and God is using it. But yeah, the one that comes out February 1st, if people go to Amazon now, they'll see it's listed as March 1st release date. That's only because Amazon hasn't received the shipment of the books from the publishers yet, but I was told by the publishers yesterday. It's Defender Publishing. Tom Horn and those guys published it just like they did Gods and Thrones and Gods of Ground Zero. And they've got the books. They're in the warehouse. They're getting shipped to Amazon. So very soon you'll see that flip over and it'll say February 1st, which is just a few days away. And they're going to start shipping them. And the title of it is, as you just said, the Rabbi, the secret message, and the identity of Messiah. Well, here's the deal. It's the continuation of the story of the first book I wrote called The Rabbi Who Found Messiah, the story of Yitzhak Kaduri. And people say, well, why would you want to do this? Like a part two. Well, but this book can be read totally on its own. It's a standalone book. I kind of retell, I don't just rehash, but I retell the foundational story, but then I go into what has happened since then. And brother, what has happened since then is nothing short of supernatural. It is absolutely unexplainable, human-wise, the things that have happened and are still happening right now all over Israel, all over the United States. By the way, in China, in the depths and hearts of China, this story is resonating and changing churches, changing communities, and changing lives. Jews are being saved. Muslim imams are being saved, brother. I've actually got a firsthand story from Rabbi Zev Porat himself, who names the name of the guy and tells the whole story of how a Muslim imam came to Christ because of the Rabbi Who Found Messiah and his story. Now, you're right, Yad Lakim. They hate this story. They hate me. They hate Zev. They're going to hate you now. They are the ACLU of Israel, if you will. They just, anything Christian they hate. And they call themselves an anti-missionary organization. Listen, I don't hate them. I'm speaking kind of, passionately about them, but they attack me. They attack Zev. They attack us continually. I don't hate them. I get it. I understand where they're coming from. They're trying to protect their turf, just like the rabbis in Jesus' day did. But the deal is, they're involved in the deep state and the fake news of this story, and many other people are, and we expose it, and we name names. We do it very judiciously, very graciously. We report nothing but the facts, and it's all backed up with references. There's no name calling. It's not a disparaging book. It's written in biographical format between me and Zev and you. It is written almost like a novel. In fact, Tom Horn read it, and he said, if I didn't know this story was true, it reads like some kind of like a Raiders of the Lost Ark kind of thing, He said, if I didn't know this story is true, I would swear that this was just a fictional piece. But he says, but I know, he says, you've got it all referenced. He said, I've been researching it myself. I've been studying this for years. Everything you're saying is true. It's just, but most of the world doesn't know it yet. But I have a feeling they're getting ready to know it. I know Defender is sending me to Israel in May with a film crew. I'm going to meet up with Zev. I think you're going to be in area too. We're going to do some filming together to make a documentary about this as well. So that's my brief. I mean, there's so much to this book, brother. We could do 10 shows on this, book alone, with all of the different things we expose, the biblical truths, the biblical teaching, the teaching on the whole story of Yitzhak Kaduri and how he defined Jesus as Messiah, the most famous, venerated rabbi in modern Israel's history, dies and leaves a note saying that Jesus is the real Messiah. But prior to leaving the note, he had been teaching his own students secretly in his yeshiva that Jesus is the Messiah. And there are 13 of them right now today who have come out publicly, and some of them have had to move. They've had to leave their cities, their homes, their towns, and shift around under false identities because of the persecution against them, because they have come out and said, yes, Rabbi Kaduri said Jesus is Messiah. To help our listeners understand from an American point of view, that would be like if Billy Graham left a note saying that Muhammad was Messiah.
Right.
I mean, to the Jewish mind, that's what they're thinking. That's as anathema it can't be. But it is, it's real, it's true, it's changing the world. Thank you for letting me unpack that.
Yeah, 300,000 Jews attended Rabbi Kaduri's funeral. This was a man who was
the president of Israel gave the eulogy.
Right. It is exactly like a Billy Graham proclaiming that Muhammad was the Messiah. And I'm thankful that you endured some personal persecution for the release of this story in its first iteration, that the enemy didn't want it to be, wanted harm to come to you. And I just remember in Genesis 50, where Joseph stands before his brothers and said, what you meant for evil, God worked for his good, so that many would be saved. You now have some freedoms you didn't have before. And
That's right.
we have some partnerships we didn't have before. And we have these vessels and vehicles in order to take this globally that we did not have before.
That's right.
And God has seen fit to put his hand upon this work and bless this so that the nations will hear and my people will hear in a language that they understand and an identification with someone that they recognize and say, you know what, if it was good enough for Rabbi Kaduri, it just might be good enough for me, and we might just see the largest Jewish revival take place in 2,000 years, because the misnomer was the Jews rejected Jesus. No, in the first 200 years, almost 1 million Jews accepted Jesus, and I'm looking for that number today. Carl Gallups, special featured guest here on the second Monday of every month at 12 o'clock p.m. for the Carl Gallups Hour. We look forward to seeing you right back here next month. I believe it is on February the 11th, and we will gather back after the book is released and talk in depth about the book and how it's being received and what people are saying about it, and be able to explore a little bit more in depth into the content of the book with the book in hand. So I wish you many blessings for you and your family, to Pamela and to all those, to Brandon and to all those who are part of your life and your family and your ministry, and wish you a very happy and healthy new year.
And same to you, my brother. God bless you. May the Lord bless you and keep you always. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.